thank you very much for the invitation. It was really, really interesting to hear about how we can make that process of marking more efficient to provide students more depth. I'm actually going to look at the other end now, so at actually the assignments that students produce. And so what I would like to introduce is an assessment that we introduced this year, where students, so in brief, students were allowed to write their assignment using generative AI. So the idea is that this is an experiential approach to developing students' assessment literacy. And it's an approach that we're going to be integrating into our new MA in Artificial Intelligence and Technology Enhanced Learning that we're launching in September. And so just to kind of provide the context for the way in which we approach the module, I just wanted to kind of introduce how this will fit into a broader programme. So the overall aim of the programme is to equip graduates with the ability to evaluate, adapt and design technology-enhanced teaching materials. And more specifically, what we'll be doing on the programme is to provide students with a firm foundation of learning theory first through a module in theories of learning and development, and then to provide them training in AI and technology enhanced learning. So first of all, a module that enables them to connect theories of learning with the affordances of technology. So to think about pedagogically, how can we use technology to support our learning? And then a module that will explore wider issues and debates. So questions like, are students digital natives? Questions like AI literacy, questions like the extent to which technology can be an enabler or a barrier to equality and inclusion. And like any programme, we'll also have research methods and the opportunity to do a dissertation in this area. So specifically relevant to what I'm talking today is the research-informed pedagogy that we'll be using throughout. So this is based on some work that I've done with a colleague in Kuwait, where we introduced this approach to a module for students on a teacher education programme. So grounded in previous research, our approach on the programme aims to help those who sign up, who may be coming from a previous background in education, so done a degree in education, or they've been a teacher for some time, but equally they could come from an industry background as well. And what we're looking to do is to help them to map their pedagogical knowledge, so knowledge of theories of learning and development, and also pedagogy, to the affordances of technology. So first of all, we try to map that, and then provide the students opportunities to further develop that knowledge through experience of technology. So first of all, as experience as learners, and then experience as teachers. So we do this by integrating technology throughout the modules, and also, in the case of what I'm talking about today, in the assessment. So we give them this opportunity to experience learning through technology, because what we know from research on teacher education is that no matter what kind of teacher education programme you provide, it is often how a teacher has learnt themselves. Their experience as a learner at school has a profound influence on how they go on to teach. So it's really important to have that experience as a learner. And so this year, in one of the modules that I've already been teaching for a few years that will form part of that programme that we're launching, I've actually integrated a new approach to assessment. So currently this module actually covers everything that will be covered across the two modules that I mentioned. So it covers linking theories of learning and pedagogies to the affordances of technology, but it also covers other cross-cutting issues. So thinking about things like digital natives, how the concept of literacy has changed, over time as we've introduced different technologies, and also issues of social justice and equality in relation to technology. But as you'll see, in terms of preparing students for this, we also integrate some elements of essay preparation and preparing a reflective essay, because as you'll see on the next slide, the assessment, the summative for this module now, is to give students that experience as a learner. What they're allowed to do is to write their essay using generative AI. And then the second part of the assignment is actually to reflect on that experience. So what we ask students to do is to write a 1,500 word essay on a standard assignment title. So this is more an argumentative essay that you'd be familiar with writing. And then for the second part, students are asked to write a reflection on their use of AI to write that essay. To scaffold students, so to make sure that they're well prepared for doing this assignment, there are two formatives. Specifically to scaffold that, they complete a 500-word reflective essay. And in that reflective essay, they're asked to focus on their tutor's use of technology on their masters. So this is to scaffold, to give them that experience of writing a reflective essay, which is something most of our students wouldn't have done in the past. So historically, at least, most of our students are international students. They have a lot of experience and have been well prepared for writing an argumentative, so a discussion type paper, but they don't have experience of reflecting on their own personal experience. And this is something that might feel quite uncomfortable for them as well. The other formative is just to give students on this module an opportunity to think about other technologies, policies and practices that we might not have covered, and also to make sure we're getting a range of employability skills through our modules as well. So we see integrating the opportunity to use AI as a way of developing AI literacy, as a way of experiencing something as a learner, but also developing critical employability skills for the future. So I've talked about the sort of the scaffolding we provide for the fact that they've now got to do a reflective essay. We do also provide an introduction to AI, talk about, well, what is AI and what is generative AI, and also introduce some basics of prompt engineering. So a few different prompt framework. So for example, we introduced the Google Parts framework that you can see here. And students get to explore for one of the weekly activities. They actually already have a go at writing a very short assignment, like about 200 to 500 words, using these prompts. And I also introduced a couple of other frameworks. So for example, the Scribe framework, which highlights the importance that it's not just a one-shot prompt that you might banter with the chatbot, to refine your prompt and improve the output that you're getting for it to better meet what you're trying to achieve. In more detail, thinking about reflection, we introduce the, so if you click on the link when you do have the slides, that goes to the Edinburgh Reflection Toolkit, which talks about different approaches to reflection that you might be familiar with, like the Gibbs model, for example, and also gives examples. Myself, I actually prefer to use a model based on De Bono's thinking hats, and there are a couple of reasons for this. One of them is that I've been using this for quite a long time on another module, which is very much based on group work and experiential and interdisciplinary as well. And what I've really liked from using it on that module is that it has space for the red hat, these initial impressions. And I try to communicate to students that this is about their feelings, because what I think this does is it helps to shift students' focus on, we talk a lot about evidence, about grounding their assignments, their argumentative assignments in the literature and evidence. But with a reflection, we want to shift their thinking to focusing on their own actual experience. And by putting in that red hat, which is this prompt to think about their own their first impressions and immediate feelings about a task, I think that helps to reorient them to their own personal experience. The other reason that I like the Bono model is that you can use it to help students to kind of build a line of argument. So you can get them to move from the benefits, so exploring with their yellow hat on what went well using AI to write this essay, to then moving to the weaknesses, and then finally thinking about, well, given my experience, what would I do differently? And specifically in this assignment, we asked students to either to focus on, well, what advice would you give another student who's using generative AI, or what advice would you give a teacher who is planning to allow their students to use AI in their assessments? And then finally, we finish off with kind of a take-home message, which is the red hat. This is all scaffolded throughout the module. So, for example, this is an example of an activity that is designed to give students experience of using the Bono model. So putting on the white hat, just describing what they did, moving to the red hat, thinking about how they felt in that experience, then moving on to what worked, what didn't, and then how you would take that forward. So I am actually collecting data from my students as we speak on their experience of this assessment. So I've done a pre-survey, and I've also done so they'll be receiving the post-survey any day, and that will explore their understanding of what generative AI is before and after, but also their experience of doing this assessment. Today, so I can't tell you about that data today. This is more a case of reflective practice. And so what I want to share with you is putting my red hat on first. What were my initial impressions of this? So I've just completed that marking the other week. I felt that these were, compared to previous years, these actually felt to be a slightly stronger set of assignments overall. They chose more diverse assignment titles this year, and I think the assignments had, certainly the essays, there was more content there. They felt that they were better at sort of synthesizing the literature, but for me, it really was the reflections stood out. It felt like students really had genuinely engaged in the reflections. So that is that they seem to be really quite motivated by this opportunity to have a go and be permitted to write their assignments using generative AI. In terms of what worked well, I did see, so as I said, I used the model because of that red hat, because of my experience in another module where it's really important for people to put their cards on the table at the start. But what I found was that actually that red hat, where I got the stronger of the assignments, it seemed to be where students genuinely were explaining how they felt about doing this assignment, that they were actually really they were really providing reflections that were grounded in their own experience of writing that assignment. So they would then follow up in the yellow and the black hat sections, providing actual examples of the prompts that they used, the output that they generated. I should mention at this point that I did also ask them to include an appendix to their assignment that included examples of the prompts they used and samples of the output that they generated, acknowledging that they couldn't provide all of the output. What I did was sort of suggest that they provided some examples, and then for other prompts, just reflections on how changing the prompt might have changed the kind of output that they got. So I felt that this did, using the red hat really did promote that genuine reflection. The other thing that I think was really helpful, and I got better quality assignments maybe than previous years, was explaining to them what made a good essay as well. So I was quite explicit in each session. So each of the kind of the assignment titles, as you'd have on many modules, related to a particular session. And I was quite explicit at the end of the sessions about, well, if you're choosing this assignment title, you know, I structure my lectures in a particular way. I start with definitions of terms, we explore them. These are the things that ought to be appearing in your assignments. The other thing that I would do is say, well, I also mention particular articles. Often the structure of those articles, while not the exact title, they might give you hints as to how to go about writing a good essay on this. In terms of what could be improved, or well, the weaknesses, I would have done this last year, but my colleagues were very, very nervous about the impact on their assessments. At this point, I think there is more general acceptance that, you know, even if I tell the students and give them some training in how to do prompting, that they're already going to be using AI anyway. So it would be better that I'm actually talking to students about this and raising their AI literacy, talking to them about what AI can and cannot do. I should say in terms of this, to be able to get this approved, I reassured them that I was only going to be sharing with students quite generic prompting frameworks, not talking about how you might tailor these to really produce a really strong assignment using generative AI. The other weaknesses were that students were actually quite anxious about doing this. So this came out in their assignments, that when they put their red hat on, some of them, while excited to explore generative AI, were quite anxious given the university policy. So here, our policy at York, and I'm sure this is like policies elsewhere, suggests that students are permitted. The permitted uses are very much similar to a proofreader. So our policy builds on the previous policies of what a proofreader can do, and kind of the limits that you would put on proofreading. So it's about suggesting where there might be an error, but not correcting it, and not changing the meaning. The students were also anxious about the less well-defined elements of the task, so the prompt log in the appendix. I've never written an essay myself using generative AI, so I couldn't know what those prompt logs might look like or what the students might do. Here, I think it's just about you as a tutor being open and communicating that, you know, you're not trying to penalize the students. All you want is a log so that then they've got the evidence to support their reflections and examples to integrate into their reflections. Another weakness was that while I did feel that the using that sort of that de Bono model that promotes the red hat and students' feelings to orient them towards sharing their own experiences, this wasn't evident in all of the students' writing. So some of the students' writing was perhaps reflecting the kind of training that they would receive outside my own module on how to write a standard argumentative essay or how to write a dissertation, that it was very much their reflections were didn't appear to be their own reflections. They were grounded in what other people were saying in the literature about generative AI and its use in writing assignments and generally in higher education. So given all this, what would I do differently next time? I think this has shown to me really the importance of red hat feeling. So I will really be highlighting that to students to help orient them towards their own experience. I've also got examples from this year now, and I think this is really important because as a student, I'd never written reflective assignments. I do have experience from other modules, but I think every time that I run a module with reflection, it gives me more insights into how to better communicate to students what makes a good reflection. And as you would have seen, I integrate a session on, two half sessions on assignment preparation within the module. I think another thing to highlight is that students should be supporting their reflections with examples of their own experience and academic sources. So some students were very good at relating to their own experience. Others tended to talk about kind of the issues that were being raised in the academic literature. Ideally, students would be doing both, and the strongest assignments really did tie those together. The other thing I saw in some of the stronger assignments was that students had tried out different tools. So this is something that added depth to their reflections and something that I would be raising the whole cohort's awareness of as well. The other thing I think that's really important, and maybe I did talk about this to the students, but I didn't make it, I don't think it was so explicit in the assignment brief. So I provide students a really detailed assignment brief, is that they were permitted to use machine translation. And I think this is really important to include when you've got international students, because from my experience of supervising students and also my experience in the classroom last year, they do make quite heavy use of machine translation. And I think this ought to also be considered as an example of AI stroke generative AI, and this kind of assignment is an opportunity to reflect on the strengths and limitations of that, and what students might be missing out on if they do engage in whole scale machine translation. All this said, my impression from the assignments was that students were generally interested in this, and this was reflected in some of the comments that I got from students in end of module feedback. So we actually ask for feedback before they do the assessment, and a couple of the students had reflected on that they really felt that this was an innovative way of assessing them and something that's going to be really important for them in the future. Thank you very much for listening.